Now, this speaker is the reason why we're all here. This is the creator, the mastermind, the founder of cryptocurrency. Let's give a warm applause for our creator, our founder, our lovely Dr. Ruja. 1, 2, 3. Applause, please.
This girl is on fire.
Ruja, where are you? Ruja.
From the dusty mesa, her looming shadow grows, hidden in the branches of the poison creosote.
So basically that was our intro, which indeed, Nicola, it was supposed to make you a little bit scared, because what's going to come up is a presentation of a really big issue. I hope you can see my screen now, of a very big issue that Jamie Bartlett has spoken about in his really awesome podcast called the Missing Cryptoqueen. So this intro was supposed to show you how we have been doing research into the OneCoin, let's say, scam, because it has been considered to be one of the biggest scams of this century. A lot of money has been wasted, around 4 billion euros on a cryptocurrency or alleged cryptocurrency, which pretty much has deceived consumers. So this is what our presentation is about. This presentation is an example of work that I am doing right now with my colleagues from the Maastricht Law Tech Lab. So with Ruta Liepina, who's in the audience, she's an assistant professor at Maastricht University, Constanza Roșca, who is a PhD student at the Maastricht Law Tech Lab, and Bogdan, who, apart from making really nice animations and also intros that I promise you work, generally speaking, he's also our research assistant at the Maastricht Law Tech Lab. So let me tell you the story of OneCoin as a cryptocurrency, or let's say fake cryptocurrency, and also the kind of consumer protection issues that it has given rise to. I'm going to do this in 3 acts. First of all, I will tell you a little bit about OneCoin. Then I'm going to speak about European consumer law, in particular 2 directives, the Directive on Unfair Commercial Practices and the Directive on Digital Content. And I will try to end my presentation with a call for more research in this field, because there are burning issues that Jamie Bartlett in his very popular podcast has been emphasizing for the past half a year that remain undecided and absolutely untouched by the authorities that are, or should at least be mindful of them. Now, this is what you normally get on social media. An example of, a friend who reaches out to you and just out of nowhere, maybe reaches out to you, and then the intention is to promote a product. This is a very typical business model, which is called basically a multi-level marketing business model. And then let's say the evil parts of multi-level marketing are called pyramid schemes. And what exactly is a pyramid scheme? This is what we will explore in the presentation. And also the legal protections against pyramid schemes will come into discussion as well. So pyramid schemes normally in the business models of companies that, for instance, use, first of all, multi-level marketing, also called network marketing. Maybe you have heard about Herbalife. I don't know, I hope that you're discussing this in the chat somehow, because I do not see that right now. But Avon, for instance, as an example of a multi-level marketing company. But like I said, Herbalife is as well. And what happens there is that you basically have a pyramid of someone who has a downline, who has a downline, who has someone in a downline, and then someone else has another downline. And then you create a pyramid of people who bring value upwards in the pyramid. This basically, in a nutshell, means that the top persons in such a pyramid schemes are going to be the main earning, let's say, commercial agents, whereas the vast majority of people, including perhaps your Facebook friends who are trying to sell you beach body or It Works or Herbalife products, are the ones who don't really make any money on this. If you see here a description of how much money you can make if you're in the 50% bottom distributors per month, you can make $95. And normally you need to buy a package, you need to get samples, you need to get products, you need to sometimes in some models buy something which is called an onload. So there are a lot of expenses that the company is going to have you put into the promise that you can be an entrepreneur and you can sell products at your ease to your friends and then make a lot of money out of that. Well, that is in itself a fake claim or a false claim, because there's really not that much money involved to start with. Now, how do cryptocurrencies come into play? So that awful introduction from a real, or let's say an event that actually took place in the real world that Jamie very much speaks about, but we really wanted to show you also how it looked like. A party of network marketeers who joined together to watch someone like Ruja, this Dr. Ruja figure, who was apparently someone who has proposed a cryptocurrency and who was lauded in Forbes magazine as, you know, someone who is about to disrupt financial markets, bank the unbanked, and all of these promises that also come with cryptocurrencies. The elimination of intermediaries and stuff like that. This product, OneCoin, that she created, that she was very happy in this particular video to call the Bitcoin killer. So her cryptocurrency was supposed to be the Bitcoin killer. This is now kind of universally considered a scam. If you go to the website of the company, onecoin.eu, you will see that you get a phishing, kind of a phishing warning, because it's not available anymore. And that is due to law enforcement in the state of New York, because they have been the ones who took the most actions against the founders of this entire pyramid scheme. So we spoke earlier about a multi-level marketing. This idea of creating a cryptocurrency and then selling it through multi-level marketing is absolutely evil, but at the same time, it's really brilliant because it spread like wildfire. A lot of people got interested in this also because of this message behind the cryptocurrency, and also because of the message behind what cryptocurrencies are supposed to be in society. And you can imagine, to consumers and customers who have absolutely no idea what cryptocurrencies are and where they can get information about that, that has been really, really detrimental. Now, how does the law deal with pyramid schemes in the European Union and also in the UK, until probably the law might change in the future? There is basically, or there are the rules embedded in the Unfair Commercial Practices Directive. That is the directive that I find to be the most exciting when dealing with a lot of digital regulatory questions that perhaps sometimes we forget that we have rules that could be applied to the type of issues that we're trying to solve otherwise with more regulation. And this is an example. And this directive has a so-called blacklist that is going to outlaw a number of commercial practices which are considered in any kind of circumstance to be unfair. And pyramid schemes are among those practices. What are pyramid schemes? The Court of Justice had a case, actually has two cases on the matter, and the most recent one where the court actually tried to define 3 different conditions for understanding what pyramid schemes actually are. That was from 2016, Nationale Loterij, a case from Belgium. And there we can see that there are 3 conditions: that you have a promise that the consumer will have an opportunity to obtain a commercial advantage, that you need to introduce other consumers into the scheme, but then also that you do that for compensation, and then the greater part of this revenue that you get as a consumer in compensation actually comes from other consumers paying this type of compensation themselves. This can bring us back in time at the beginning of the 90s when Ponzi schemes, this is the more popular name given to pyramid schemes, were running rampant in Eastern Europe. This is an example of the most well-known pyramid scheme from the country where I come from, that's Romania. It's called Caritas. And it's this very typical situation where, you know, the idea is you put money into a bowl, and then the consumer believes that, you know, the more money is put in the bowl, the more money you can draw out of the bowl, which is economically, it makes no sense. So at the end of the day, what a pyramid scheme does is that it takes your money to pay other members that are at this bottom chain, and then whatever runs also up in this pyramid in terms of economic value is going to benefit the people at the top. In the example of OneCoin, that being Ruja. There's also an additional issue because, of course, we don't really know, and this is what we're doing in our paper. We're trying to determine that, does this definition that was set out in the case law and also in the annex of the Unfair Commercial Practices Directive, does that really fit the situation where you have a cryptocurrency, which is actually not a cryptocurrency, because instead of having, you know, some sort of an Ethereum-based type of CryptoKitty product like Bianca was talking about, OneCoin was actually a MySQL database. It had absolutely no blockchain whatsoever, but these are factual considerations that Jamie Bartlett covers much better. And that also the cases that are now pending and the indictments against some of the leaders of this network ascertain. So we're not necessarily trying to talk about the facts, but we're trying to talk about the categorization, the legal categorization. So if indeed you simply do not have a cryptocurrency, you do not have blockchain, then what can you do? Can the selling of that be considered in this MLM format a pyramid scheme, because you're trying to promote something that consumers might benefit from, but actually they do not do that in the end. It's a little bit complicated because this definition, like we saw, it might apply very clearly to these classical Ponzi schemes. But when you have a cryptocurrency that has absolutely no value and you're just mislabeling that product, as you could also argue has been happening in Herbalife, then can you really apply this annex consideration? Now, if you don't apply that, or let's say that assuming arguendo, then we can't apply that limitation. There's also the supply of digital content in this new directive that still needs to be implemented nationally. That could come to help us because as a lot of cryptocurrency / blockchain companies, there's quite a lot of changes in the business model, and you're drawing the consumer in with one promise, but you're actually ending up delivering something completely different. And this directive on digital content actually talks about that quite nicely, although it doesn't really give consumers the type of remedies that we're looking at here. To conclude, why is it important to really give the necessary attention to this phenomenon? Because it, so not only that multi-level marketing, let's say, as the more benign version of this pyramid scheme construct, is becoming more and more popular, but it is also becoming more and more difficult to tell because of social media. Or not only that is becoming difficult to tell, but it's kind of going into the social structure of your relationships online. So it becomes this social commerce. It goes into relationships that are based on other values than commercial values, and that is really a very big issue. So I think that there's a lot of research that needs to be done on this, even computationally. And last but not least, why it's also important to consider what happens to OneCoin from an MLM limitation perspective is because some of the people who are promoting OneCoin to their big networks on these kind of big stages are promoting now a different coin, and that is a DAG coin, and they're selling it exactly the same way because, like I said, it's been getting a lot of traction to promote cryptocurrencies like these. in a multi-level marketing environment. And it's very, very dangerous. I think if you listen to the podcast, you will hear Jamie Bartlett's massive frustration with the fact that a lot of authorities, national authorities, have simply refused to be hands-on about the matter and really start either applying sanctions, removing or taking down the activity of these kind of companies that at the end of the day are trying to defraud consumers. Hopefully this has given you some insights into MLMs and why it's important to look at MLMs on the internet nowadays. And for those of you interested, we can also send you our nice video. I think we're also going to post it on Twitter because we were very happy with it. And sorry that it didn't work out to show it to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Fantastic, really, really interesting. Ponzi schemes across Europe, I'm sure there are many of them. Okay, Bogdan, do you have a summary of the chat? Any questions from the chat?
Yeah, mainly about ergonomic chairs and lumbar support, and then about various pyramid schemes that everybody, I think, knows around here. But because it's interesting, because we all mentioned some of them, so maybe I can ask, maybe I can start with a question. Because do you think like the fact that selling cryptocurrency, which is not maybe not a lot of people know about it, compared with like the traditional ones when you sell pods or like cosmetics or whatever, is that different if people don't know about it? Because if I think about it, like you can also have like a super bad or shitty pod, but you say like it's magical and it does cool stuff, but at the end of the day it doesn't. And you can do that the same with cryptocurrencies. Like one coin, it's not a real cryptocurrency because it's an SQL database. So at the end of the day, it's kind of the sort of kind of thing. But do you think it's worse if people don't know exactly about what they're buying, like cryptocurrencies?
So I think that's we can tackle that in the paper, Bogdan. But so I think that that's very much at the heart of what's happening here. So in the actual podcast, there you can hear a lot of very tearful types of recollections of people who feel scammed and who actually invested a lot of money in this, invested their savings, and even worse, invested or convinced their friends and family to invest their own savings. Right? And then here, the entire situation is this hype that has been constructed around Bitcoin and around Ether and around even Dogecoin. I remember Tristan mentioning that in the chat earlier on. And the thing is that if consumers go and start investing in these very speculative markets without having any kind of information about what exactly even is a cryptocurrency, they will just think, wow, if only I bought Bitcoins 10 years ago, or, well, I mean, like, let's say 8 years ago, then I would have been very rich today. So I think it's very easy to have these kind of very awful effects when you have the ingredients of, people really wanting to make money very fast, then having this promise of, oh, we don't trust in banks, let's remove banks. So you're actually making an investment in something that can give you a better life, even for your children, because we're not going to have the same structure of society. And then you have this very cult-like idea around a lot of these brands and a lot of these companies, because they simply will try to brainwash you. And again, this might be a very large statement, but if you listen to the podcast, it's definitely a recurring thread there.
Thank you. Can we have a link? Okay.
Sorry, a link to the podcast? Yeah, sure. There is a question on YouTube on the stream. Caroline says, Catalina, you did mention Ponzi schemes, but have you looked at the classic Ponzi regulation models like investment fraud? And I think also someone else, maybe Tristan, mentioned before, like the Madoff scandal.
Yeah, so basically basically the entire idea around or behind the reason why we're looking at European consumer protection law is because European consumer protection law covers people like individuals who have invested in these kind of schemes, right? So Caroline, you're very correct to say, well, there might be some sort of investment rules that apply if you have an investment fund being defrauded. However, if you have a consumer, and that's really very much the bottom of pyramid schemes, this is pretty much the consumer that is going to suffer all of these costs. Consumer protection actually specifically mentions MLMs. So prohibitions against models that are predatory. So that's why we are focusing on consumer protection.
Okay.
All right, thank you. So in the chat, I didn't see. Okay, there is a question: how many Bulgarians got
genuine
sucked?
question, because this was a huge deal, particularly in Bulgaria and also in Moldova. So, do we actually know how many victims of OneCoin there were, or do we have a good estimate of that? Because honestly, we kind of, in the UK, we go, ha ha ha, how funny that people got suckered. Millions of European citizens got suckered by this. This is not funny, right?
I cannot agree with you more. So I do not have an estimate right now as to the number of citizens per country. But what I can tell you is that there have been a lot of consumers involved, and the total loss made in this system has been 4 billion euros. So this is the appreciation that Jamie Bartlett mentions in the podcast. And I think that there's a lot of investigation that needs to be done, a lot of journalistic investigation, because on the one hand, indeed, so you can have a look and speak to some people who were involved in these bubbles. And I think that there's quite a few of them who are active on Twitter. You can follow them, you can see what they say there. But the actual facts and ascertaining the actual facts and the business model of OneCoin is quite difficult. So you can imagine that even measuring the scope of how much it's spread and how many people have been affected is an undertaking that is happening at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, indeed. I agree. I agree. It was crazy. I see Andres with his hand.
Yeah, following up on that, one of the problems that has been happening with this is the lack of enforcement or lack of willingness by police forces and prosecutors to actually even look at this. This has gone completely unlitigated, and I think it's a common thread that we see with lots of cybercrime. There is a lack of understanding of what is happening with some of these cryptocurrency frauds, and the police is not interested. One of the things that came across quite clearly in the podcast was precisely this, that there was no willingness whatsoever by the Metropolitan Police to even start looking at this. So it came to journalists to actually take an interest.
Absolutely correct. And I have to say that we were also, we had a project at our lab, and we had some contact with national authorities from various member states who do consumer law enforcement. And I asked them in a meeting of this e-enforcement academy, I asked them, so are you taking any measures against OneCoin? Because it was, I think, around the time when the podcast was released, and it was just very shocking that the press hadn't given, so even the press, right? So even investigative journalism hadn't given this issue enough attention. And then, consumer protection agencies were simply caught off guard, and they had absolutely no idea about what was happening in this space. So you're completely correct. And on the one hand, indeed, so we have the criminal dimension, because, this is fraud in the most criminal way possible. But on the other hand, we also have to consider the type of civil remedies and civil liability that is going to be the only way in which these people who have been duped can get their money back, if of course, there's a way in which you can trace the money and then try to recover any kind of assets. So that's even a different part of the story. But yeah, it's shocking to see the limited amount of digital enforcement that has been happening on this.
So for whatever it's worth, part of the problem in the US is that there was an Amway case that put an end to, the creativity that the FTC was using in these cases. And so that's kind of a roadblock that still exists. So to the extent that the EU can lead on a new way of framing the inquiry around pyramid schemes, it would open a new door for the US FTC to bring new claims as well.
I'm so happy you mentioned that, Andrea, because the thing is that indeed, so multi-level marketing is a very sneaky business model. It's been around for decades, and the FTC on the one hand, but also the European Union in the past had the opportunity to say, no, we're going to stop this model because it's not ethical. So you can't have, like, I can't come here and then start selling you stuff in this meeting because we are, in a kind of a venue that has a very specific nature. It's social, it's academic, right? So the commercial speech would be very much out of place here. And it would also maybe put you in this situation where, I don't know, maybe you will feel pressured to say yes. I mean, if you're going to sell some CryptoKitties to Andres, like after 2 glasses of beer, online, I mean, will he make the same type of transactional decisions if he is not in that situation? So I think the FTC had a chance to stop this type of business model and didn't. The European Union had a chance to stop this type of business model and didn't. And they tried to say, oh, yeah, okay, on the one hand, we have the really nasty Ponzi schemes, so the pyramid schemes, so let's stop those. But hang on, there might be also quite a lot of manipulation with the rest, but what are we going to do about them? I think in China, Amway at some point was stopped. So there was a massive prohibition on MLMs in China. But even China afterwards, after this blatant prohibition, said, it's fine, you can just come in and you can offer this promise to people that they can become micro entrepreneurs and you can start doing things. And I see Olga also in the chat, a question for the European Parliament, for sure. I mean, what I find really interesting about this case is that, I know a lot of the literature written by everyone participating here today. And we're talking about AI, and we're talking about pets and all of these super sophisticated things. But at the end of the day, we still have problems with some very old business models that we didn't manage to overcome. And I think this is a very good example of, maybe just the political will not being there, or maybe the lobbying of even this MLM kind of direct selling industry. So I think indeed a question to the European Parliament could be interesting. But I really think it's much more, we have rules that are, at least in the European Union, that can be used. They just need to be enforced. And I feel that it's a little bit kind of running in circles and trying to figure out who should initiate that.